All right, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. We're at 1:03 p.m. now. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Tyler McDaniel. I'm the Environmental Health Program Coordinator with Blueprint Kentucky, formerly known as SEDIC. And you are at one of our monthly Brownfields Community Redevelopment webinars. I recently took over this series from my colleague Shane Barton, who departed, took a different position in Virginia. So we miss Shane dearly, and I will try my best to fill his very big shoes. But thank you all for being here. A little bit about Blueprint Kentucky. We do a mixture of community development, technical assistance work and sort of direct work with around community planning, strategic planning, things like that. And a part of that is this Brownfields program. The Brownfields program is a partnership between Blueprint Kentucky and the Kentucky and an Energy and Environment Cabinet's Brownfield office. And in this partnership, the Brownfield office and us at Blueprint, it allows us to reach more communities through education, through outreach, and then through doing things like this to amplify all this really great work happening around the state with these really complex projects. So within this program, we also offer some technical assistance to communities that will help them become more competitive through the brownfield application itself, as well as doing more specific outreach and engagement strategies that we think are applicable not only to brownfields redevelopment, but to more sort of long-term impact and community engagement and citizen involvement in projects like these and uh, around the state of Kentucky. A little bit of housekeeping before I throw it over to our panelists here. So we have a Q&A section, which you can see at the bottom of the Zoom taskbar there. So any questions that come up during this presentation, feel free to throw them in there, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. I'll be facilitating that with our panelists, and a really great chance to just ask questions about this really amazing, robust project. So this is also being recorded. It will be posted to the Blueprint Kentucky YouTube page. That page houses our entire catalog of webinars. I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Look for this posting in a few days, share it out with your friends, your family, your acquaintances, whoever. And then also, if you're interested in the brownfields process, we have a lot of really great webinars and resources in there that walk through, you know, each component of the application, as well as a lot of the ideas involved and some of those strategies I mentioned, and also examples like this from communities around the state. So, with all that being said, it is my absolute pleasure today to introduce this first new webinar, or this first webinar under my direct supervision. Partnering for Productive Change, Maysville's Abandoned to Apartment Success Story, focusing on the Hayswood Hospital in Maysville. This is a really great project, a really great example of the Brownfields process in action, both in, how they took this long abandoned site, applied for the application, did really great community engagement, are in the process of that remediation, and then have a longer term vision that plugs into some other pieces of the various community plans, which you'll hear all about. The panelists are probably sick of hearing me say this. I am a native of Maysville, Kentucky, so it's very special to me to be able to do this for my first solo webinar. So today we have Matt Wallingford, the city manager of Maysville, Debra Cotterill, the mayor of Maysville, Kristie Dodge, the community development director at the Buffalo Trace Area Development District, Kaylee Ziegler, community development specialist at the Buffalo Trace Area Development District, and Tom Manning-Beavin, president and CEO of Frontier Housing. And all of these folks really came together to make this happen. And yeah, I'm going to throw it over to them to get started and talk us through this really great project. So take it away, y'all.
All right, I believe I'm up first. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Wallingford. As Tyler said, I'm the city manager here in Maysville, and I've been working here for 24 years. approaching 25. And when I came on board with the engineering department here at the city in 2001, I got to work with a very, very sharp individual. His name was Sam Baker. He was the longtime city engineer here. But one of our main focus when I walked into this building was, what are we going to do with this hospital? So I kind of got thrown into the mix and have been involved with it ever since then. The hospital closed down in 1983 and was originally purchased by Presbyterian Homes. In 1994, the property was purchased by E.D. Hay Incorporated. And this was the only property listed in the corporation. So this was all that they owned. Originally, they wanted to do an assisted living facility on site, and then later kind of changed their tune and decided that they wanted to do an apartment complex. And even before, and this was around 2002, these conversations, but even before that, there was a lot of back and forth in the mid to late 90s between the city and the owner about, what are you going to do? The city would condemn the property. The city would uncondemn the property. A few years later, they condemned it again. And then they finally decided that if they condemned the property, a court could possibly force the city to demolish it. So they uncondemned it. And to be honest with you, at some point, and I don't remember when, we condemned it again. And I believe it was 7 or 8 years ago, the county attorney advised us to uncondemn it, release the condemnation, because we did not want to be an owner of the property. With that said, ever since I've been here, we have gone after grant after grant after grant to try to remediate the property and work with the owner. Just some notes here. In 2002, the abatement estimate was around $1.2 million. If I recall, we had an estimate anywhere between $1 million and $5 million to demolish the property. The city had the money, but didn't feel like that was a wise use of taxpayers' dollars, because essentially that would have wiped out the city's contingency fund. In late 2002, the city applied for a Brownfield grant for up to $200,000. And I do remember going through the building with my boss, who was the city engineer, as well as members from the State Environmental Protection Office, Herb Pettigene being one of them. And it was great to see Herb when they rededicated the hospital with Frontier a while back. Hadn't seen him in a long time. In 2006, there was a phase 1 assessment done. The city worked closely with the state as well as the Corps of Engineers on a phase 1 assessment. In 2008, we did a geological survey because they were concerned if we were to demolish the building, if there would be slippage from the hillside. And come to find out from that survey that essentially that building was notched in rock and is not going anywhere. I mean, it's solid. In 2009, we applied for those of you who've been around a while, if you remember the T21 grants, we applied for one of those to go after even more environmental remediation. If I remember correctly, back then it was to try to go after a phase 2. After that, it was kind of crickets for a while. And I know Mayor Cotterill is going to tell you a story about how all this started, but the city never gave up trying to do something with the hospital. From day one, it was elected officials now and elected officials when I started. Citizens what are you going to do with the hospital? What are you going to do with the hospital? Well, a few years ago, as the mayor will tell you, the stars aligned and we're doing something with the hospital. So that's a pretty rough history of at least my tenure here. And I'll turn it over to Mayor Cotterill, and she can continue on with the partnerships.
Hold on, I'm sharing my screen. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties. I'm sure everybody's noticed. It's showing me, it's not letting me go to the slide. Okay, let me share it again.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Sorry about that, y'all. I don't know what happened there.
Okay, can everybody see it?
Yes.
All right, good to go. Do you want to go through these next couple real quick?
I can leave that when I start, Kaylee, and then, or, you guys can go ahead, or Matt, is there anything else you want to add to what she has shown there?
No, ma'am. I mean, you're obviously seeing a picture from 1969 and a current picture. No, I don't have anything to add. I think,
Okay.
those are the 24 years of experience I've had with the hospital.
Okay, Kaylee, you can shift to this one and then in a minute on down to the next one. So upon becoming mayor, the majority of the comments that I got from citizens was, as Matt said, what are you going to do about that old hospital, about that eyesore? And people were very passionate about it. And so I started the search for solutions, but I'm going to tell you, there was not a clear path that I could find. Then Mason County became part of Frontier Housing Service Area. And former state representative Mike Denham referenced their work. He was on the Kentucky Housing Authority and had become familiar with Frontier. And so he shared with us some of the good work that they did. And that led us to kind of having this meeting because Maysville and Mason County had a housing crisis, and it was having a tremendous negative impact on our families as well as economic development efforts in our area. And so an introductory meeting was set up with representatives from Frontier Housing, including Tom, Buffalo Trace Area Development District, City Manager Matt Wallingford, County Judge Owen McNeil, and myself to discuss the need for the housing in Maysville. And during that meeting, Tom shared some of the projects that they did and how they went about the work that they did for families. And the former Buffalo Trace ad director, Amy Kennedy, said, she brought up the old Hayswood. Well, I want to tell you, everybody in the room rolled laughing because it had been such an obstacle for 40 years. And I think most people thought there wasn't a solution. And then the simple question, Tom, would you be interested? And he replied, maybe, I haven't seen it yet. And so from that moment, that set into motion a domino effect that resulted in this project. Now you're going to hear more details in a minute, but there's a couple of points that I would like to stress. The long-standing working relationship between the city, the county, and the ad got this project on the right track. Some would have said that the timeline was impossible, but ad community development director Kristie Dodge literally burned the midnight oil to get the application to perfection and on time and working with Frontier to get it submitted. The trust and dedication of those individuals working to seize every opportunity is what made this project a reality. And just a little side note, our relationship with Frontier has now also saved a housing authority project that was dead in the water until we asked Tom for some advice about whether buildings could be salvaged or not. Well, not only did Tom give us an answer, but he came up with a solution. And that relationship, and then especially having everyone in the room, is what is key to the success of both of these endeavors. And if you'll go one more slide, Kaylee, I'm going to end here with what is especially great about the Hayswood project is that you can kind of see in this slide is its location on the hillside overlooking our historic downtown and entertainment district with a fantastic view of the river. The residents will have easy access to amenities like medical services, banking, federal and state agencies, city and county government offices, public library, churches, as well as retail shopping, eateries, festivals, and events that we have in the city. This Hayswood project is a win-win for Maysville beyond the housing that it's going to provide. It's on so many levels. And I am so thankful and appreciative to all the individuals that is making it possible. And now I'm going to roll that over to Ms. Kristie.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, one of the questions that we were asked is, why brownfields? And, Matt had referenced early on that the city was part of a few different efforts in 2002 and then again in 2006. In 2006, the Buffalo Trace Ad had received a assessment grant to do various assessment work for brownfield properties. And between that and what the Army Corps of Engineers had come up with, it was kind of a no-brainer that Hayswood had a lot of asbestos and lead and possibly even other contaminants as well, that needed to be removed safely and abated properly before anything could really be done with Hayswood. Even with, it's been thrown out a few times, even if it was just completely removed from the site, you still had to abate those hazardous materials. So it was kind of a no-brainer that we needed some brownfield money on it or some other way. But it was always difficult to make it work because traditionally the EPA brownfield maxed out at $500,000 of grant. With the introduction of the bill money, the infrastructure money that came through under the Biden administration, it raised the ceiling for a lot of grant opportunities, including the EPA brownfield. And so the year that we applied for these funds, the ceiling was $2 million max. And so we kind of went back to work. The local partners, as the mayor had highlighted, were kind of already in place. And so it was kind of time to start pulling in the state and the federal partners, of current and of past both. And one thing that the ad is, strive to, and as well as the city and the county here, is to keep close relations with both the state and federal partners and projects. We like to try to pull them in as early as possible. I always encourage that with other people that are developing projects, because they can really help to guide you and kind of steer you in the direction that you need to go. They can help you think on things that maybe you're not thinking about, and really try to address that through not only the application process, but also in the project development process. So this project does go all the way back. You'll see in the picture, these are a lot of the, partners that were involved from state, and we didn't have any federal folks here, but obviously there was a lot of involvement there. On the far right of that picture is Herb Pettigene, who was way back when the effort started, the state brownfield coordinator. And then to his, it'd be to the left of that, his right, is Amanda Lefevre, who was a brownfield coordinator at the time that we started all of these efforts. Currently, it's Kirsten O'Leary. Amanda is still staying involved because she'll tell you, anybody that asks her about Hayswood, it's been a passion of hers. Lynn True worked at the state office as well. All great partners. They helped us through so much and gave us the guidance that we needed to try to put everything together, and really make things happen. So it just kind of seemed like the stars just fully aligned, and we were able to kind of, between the local partnerships, getting the state and federal folks on board, and then also, the increase in the funding, and also the ability to waive match. That was, a big one as well. It just seemed like everything was finally kind of coming into place, and Frontier being willing to, kind of jump in there as well. Some of the others, just to mention, again, I can't stress enough to, if you're working on an application or a project, reach out to both state and federal folks. They're going to help you get through everything that you really need to. Cindy Nolan was with the EPA Region 4 at the time. I called her multiple times and harassed her a little bit, to try to get, good guidance on the application. and things that we needed to kind of watch out for in the project development side of it. So I think that wraps up that slide pretty much. Tom, I'll hand it over to you for commitment and community involvement that went on during the application
Sure.
process.
Yeah, thank you, Kristie. I think I want to start out by thanking the mayor and Kristie and Matt, just the partnership that Frontier enjoys and that welcomed us into Maysville is really tremendous and made this possible. Frontier, when the way we wound up getting to Mason County in part was because we already served Fleming County, which is an adjoining county. We had recently finished a rental project in Robertson County, which is another county in the Buffalo Trace Area Development District region. And so looked at both Mason and Bracken County because neither one of those counties had a housing development nonprofit doing work actively in them. So we started a conversation. Mike Denham, former House delegate in the state house, connected us, and that led to the conversation that the mayor referenced, and that was a great meeting, and was indicative of the partnership that we continue to enjoy. One of the first things I did was to contact the realty agent for the owner, because the property was, at least had a for sale sign on it. I don't know how long it had been listed. My memory is that it had been a while, so it was not property it was not new on the market. And initially, the owner wanted to make a big windfall out of that project, that the sale, and I told the agent that just we couldn't start there. And I reminded the agent that the owner was sitting on an environmental liability. The property, I asked if there's a phase one. The agent didn't know if phase one environmental had been gotten. I'm not an attorney, but as I understand it, if when a buyer takes ownership of a piece of property, if there are environmental hazards and there isn't an or isn't a phase one done, that there's no mechanism for that buyer to say, well, that hazard existed before I bought it, which is a big deal, in particular in a building as large as Hayswood, and a building with as much asbestos, as much lead as existed there. So the early conversations did not go very far, but then we continued to work on it, and I continued to talk to the agent, because the agent, I think, took on board some of what I had to say about environmental hazards and contacted me back, and we went back and forth, and got to a number that we thought we could live with in the scope of the whole project. As we were um, as we were looking at the whole scope, I hoped to get the sale down under $100,000. We settled at 125. I called our consultant around rental housing development, and that consultant reminded me that in a project of about $10 million, $30,000 was not going to change all that much. And so we're talking, and Hayswood is probably at least a $10 million project. So we agreed on an option, and we entered into an option that had think we put $1 down. I don't think we essentially had a cost-free option, and that allowed us to then start all of the studies. And Kristie did a great job of connecting us and lining up for us, not just connecting us, but lining up for us the capacity to get the state to do both the phase 1 and eventually the phase 2 environmental. That process, I think, started in about June of 2022. And we already knew that we were sort of aiming for a fall of 2022 application date. Now, have I got that year right, Kristie? I just want.
You do, yes.
Okay, good. But we didn't know what the due date of the grant would be. But we knew that that was about the timeline because historically the EPA had put out the NOFA and expected applications in the fall. So, and because of Kristie's expertise, we kind of knew all the building blocks we would need. So we got the phase 1 started, and then that led to a phase 2, and we while we were doing that, we also got a structural engineer to go through the property and did some other checking to try and assure ourselves that we could effectively create something in that space after the remediation was done. Because our whole premise from the beginning was, if we can, let's save this building, because it was once a vibrant community asset within a block of the heart of downtown Maysville. It's just over a block from the cinema on the main drag in Maysville. It would be a shame to lose it as a historic building in town. So we wanted to know what our options were. And then we continued to go and go, and we were the phase 2 helped us also generate the budget to ensure ourselves that we could do the remediation for the $2 million that was on the table, the maximum grant in that round. And that took a fair bit of faith from my board. It was interesting. When we agreed, when I asked them if we could go explore taking Maysville in Mason County in as a service area, they were glad for me and some other staff people to go explore that. Then I come back to my board chair and say, oh, by the way, guess what? There's a huge project that's super cool. And to my, I guess, my board's credit, they were willing to continue letting staff explore the possibilities. But as we wound towards an application date, once the NOFA came out and we knew that we were aiming for a November application, there was a moment where we figured out that Frontier is the best owner applicant for the brownfield money, because the applicant for the brownfield money must own the property at the time of application. When we figured out that Frontier could be the applicant, and that made most sense to all of us, that at that point, Frontier really, my board really wanted to know that we thought we could remediate the building for the $2 million that we could apply for. And that was a point of tension, because we had to start working towards a closing before we really had that remediation budget. And what I really appreciate and continue to look back at is that both the city and the county and the Buffalo Trace Area Development District were all prepared to have conversations about what happens if 2 million won't fully remediate, what happens if we aren't successful this year. And there was never a time when I had any doubt that both the city and the county were prepared to continue to apply for money, continue to work with us to find places to seek that grant money to do the cleanup if we weren't successful on that $2 million application, or if the budget was for remediation was greater than the grant application maximum allowable dollar amount. So thankfully, as we got closer and closer, we found out that in fact experts believed that the $2 million was going to be sufficient. We bought the property, and then we made application. And in the days before making application, there's a public involvement, public notice requirement. This slide shows the headline in the Maysville paper, page 1 above the fold. If I didn't know before that this was a big deal in town, no, being headline news was pretty significant. And so this article came out the day before we had a public meeting, and we held that meeting in a room that probably seats 200 people. And I won't say that it was full, but I think we had 50 to 75 citizens in the room interested in what we were up to and what this might turn into. And the public comments that night were overwhelmingly positive. I can't remember a single comment that was negative. I think there were some earnest questions about what's your plan? What do you want to do with the building afterwards? Which again reminded me that it was important to enter into all this work with a plan. And we always planned to do housing, and probably rental housing, and probably a component of that rental housing being income targeted. But we've always also been open to mixed income and being creative around other uses as well. So that public meeting was incredibly positive, and several times in the meeting and afterwards, people came up to me and people said out loud in the meeting, "I just hope you don't have to tear down the building." There was also confirmation that not only is this project important from a blight removal standpoint, but this project also is important because it is a community asset. It can be a community asset again. So we tried to involve the community there at the beginning, not just because we're required to, but I feel like it was a really good meeting and a really important meeting for us to do. After we made application, I again was in Maysville and sat down with the mayor and with Matt to make telephone calls to neighboring property owners, just to have conversations about, we've made an application, we don't know when we'll hear, this is what we want to do, and the mayor and Matt were wonderful at introducing me and helping me connect to those adjacent property owners. So and we continue to have public meetings, continue to try to engage the public in a number of different forums. That some of that is prescribed by the Brownfield grant, and part of that is just because we know that this is an important project in the city and important to residents of the city. So we've continued to look for opportunities. In fact, this summer we had some staff in Maysville on a Saturday, a street festival, in a booth, just engaging people who walked by, asking some pointed questions about what people wanted to see, what their concerns were. That all important feedback. We know going in that we may not make everyone 100% happy, but it was really affirming to see that people appreciated being involved, being asked, being given the opportunity to be engaged and give their 2 cents. And go to the next slide, I think.
Yeah, so back to you know, some of the different things that Tom had highlighted, we tried to kind of compress everything into a single timeline, which was really hard to do. So what we had to do is we had to kind of pick the 30,000 foot overview of everything, the key milestones, I guess you would say. And so this kind of encapsulates it. I can't get that out all together. And it was really hard to fit into this one slide. I will say that. But you can see back at 1983, you know, the Hayswood Hospital had closed. They had opened up a new hospital up on the hill, which left this one abandoned. There was a lot of ongoing efforts from there all the way up until 2022, and then that's when we had the fateful meeting and everything. What I will say is throughout this whole timeline, there was a lot of team effort that was going on. I know there's been a lot of like thanks to this one and thanks to that one that's gone on so far in this webinar, but there really was like so much effort that was going on, and everything was running in 10 different directions at the same time, almost to create a perfect storm for everything to continue moving. We were working with the state to try to get through all of the different, you know, phase ones and phase two. Frontier was working at the same time through all of the property options and trying to gain access to it. The public participation, trying to figure out what it was that the public viewed, if they saw any adverse effects from their side. Was this a good thing? Was this a bad thing? Maybe they were going to, you know, say something or think of something that we weren't thinking of that we needed to really think through and watch for in the development of it. We were working with the federal folks to try to, you know, adhere to everything and plug all of the pieces in place that would be needed for the material for the application. So there was just a lot to it all. The state did do the phase one and phase two. We had LFI that had helped out with the draft ABCA, which came up with the cost estimates. Kind of a funny thing, the max amount that you could ask for at the time of this was $2 million. And I had a conversation with one of the federal folks, and they were like, I'm not sure you should ask for the full 2 million. So Frontier and everybody went in with an application of $1,999,900. So we shaved $100 off of it and still was able to make it work. Again, you know, if you're in the middle of developing a project, try to sit down and really like, you know, do your timeline on this and try to set everything up. So you're hitting those milestones as you need to. As Tom had highlighted earlier, there is, you know, acquisition is very key, the date of that. So, you know, you have to have the phase one while it's still in the ownership of not the applicant, but the owner that is that has it before the application is made, and then ownership has to be taken within 6 months of that phase one, and all of that has to be completed prior to the application. So there's a lot of timing and effort that goes into that think through. Of course, once we got to the point of actual award, everybody was super excited. That was in July of 2023 is when it was actually announced ahead of that, but that's when the actual grant was officially put into a cooperative agreement. And we were able to go to new grantee workshop. Frontier and Buffalo Trace sent some people in October so we could kind of get our bearings straight. There was a lot of paperwork that went on with all of that. But everybody was excited, ready to move it forward. We worked a lot with the EPA and also with their technical assistance folks at ICMA and NJIT. They were a lot of help. So we were bouncing RFPs back and forth to bring on a qualified environmental professional, and they helped a lot in that. I'm never a person that is scared to kind of reach out and try to pick somebody's brain to make sure that we can make the puzzle fit together appropriately. LFI ended up being the one that won the award for the qualified environmental professional, and their expertise, Bob Perkins and his group, has been phenomenal. They've got a lot of years of experience, and so they've been able to kind of be a watchdog, I guess you would say, for Frontier with a lot of the environmental aspects as we kind of solicited out for abatement contractor and trying to get into the remediation of work. And then, of course, the closeout date on this grant is October of 2027. But I really don't think that it's going to take that long. I think that crews are moving along really well, and so everything is kind of rolling really good. But again, just can't emphasize enough that you know, there was a lot of teamwork that was going on, a lot of agencies, both local, state, and federal, that were all pulling together to try to make this happen. The other thing before we move on in slides is that I will emphasize that within those partnerships, we were all having to keep in mind that this is almost like a two-phase project. So the EPA funds are being used to remove all of the hazardous substance. But there's also this second piece of it that does not have to do with EPA, but does hinge on the grant, which is the redevelopment aspect of it, in which Frontier is going to use tax credits and private investment, possibly, I'm not sure, in order to develop this and turn it into housing. And so through all of the planning efforts and the partnerships, one thing that everybody was helping us to kind of keep tabs on was the fact that you are looking at two separate pieces of this with two different pots of money, but it's all going to play together and it's going to overlap for the full success of the project. SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, we had pulled them into conversations way early on into the project just to try to go ahead and get a grip on how will the redevelopment of this project play into the historic tax credits for one, but also with just the abatement and with receiving federal funds in order to remediate the hospital. And so they've been able to provide a lot of guidance from the get-go, because one of the maps that was early on in there shows that it's right at the edge of the downtown historic district. And although it's not in the historic district, it is what they call a contributing factor to the historic district. So there's a lot of care that's had to be taken through the clearinghouse process and through the application process. And then especially with post-award, and that Frontier is going to have to kind of keep an eye on as they move forward with that. So I think that sums up the timeline, so we can kind of bounce on into where we're at now with the project. And Kaylee or Tom, I don't know if you guys want to speak on where the project is right now, and then we've got some pictures after that that shows the before and after.
Sure. Kaylee, can you go back a slide? I just wanted to note something on the timeline. Just two things. One is, as Kristie alluded to, this isn't to scale, because there's 40 years in the first inch and a half of the to the right, to the far right of this slide. And the other thing I wanted to note is that, as Kristie alluded to, the cleanup needed to be done in order for us to then be able to apply for the programmatic funding that would help us build the housing. So once we were awarded in May of 23, and then there was a year that we didn't fully count on, but there was a year of technical submission things where Kristie and Stephanie Cooley from our staff really worked back and forth continually with EPA staff to get us to the point where we were ready to procure a consultant. And then once we procured our consultant, the consultant helped us procure a contractor. The procurement process was pretty exacting. You know, the EPA wanted to look at all those procurement documents and look at nearly everything all the way along the line, which wasn't horrible. It just took time. And so what I'm trying to say about this timeline is that there's a lot of time that lapses between even from award to starting cleanup, because we were awarded in May of 23. We didn't start cleanup until November 24. And we didn't procure the consultant until the summer of 24, and we didn't procure the contractor till 45 days or so before cleanup actually started. So a long runway to get to cleanup is something that should be expected, and it just is indicative of how long this takes, and I think Tyler said in one of our prep meetings, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It takes a long time to use this many dollars and to do this big a project. So, but then Kentucky Housing Corporation tax credit round and the low income housing tax credit program is the program that funds most large scale affordable housing rental projects in the United States. The Kentucky Housing Corporation's window or funding round for low-income housing tax credits happens once a year. Usually that application is due in August. So we kind of kept an eye on how do we get remediation done at least enough so that architect can get in the building and make decisions about how many units can be created. How do we create that much enough access early enough so that we can have an application ready? So we, I think at this point, Kayla, we can kind of go forward. But we've that's always been in the back of our minds and in trying to make sure that we were done enough in time for our architect to take a look at the at the building and make real decisions. So there's a series of before and after pictures, and it's hard to describe how littered with soft material the building was. Depending on where you were in the building and what floor you were on, you might be walking a calf deep in insulation and crumbled ceiling tiles and all kinds of other debris, or dodging ductwork that had fallen because the metal supports had rusted. So very, very cluttered this building was. And so we're at the point where the top two floors are cleaned and have been are fully accessible by the architect. So that's the fourth floor and the third floor. The second floor is the cleanup is nearing completion, and then the first floor and the basement we still are in the midst of remediation, but there's a lot of hope that that work can be completed still yet this summer. And yeah, it's I've not been in it since the cleanup started. I'm looking forward to it. I like to feel like it's going to feel like night and day. So here's a picture. I referenced being present in Maysville on a Saturday to engage the community. Here's Kaylee and Kristie, and then Stephanie Cooley from our staff. So the three of them collaborated to try and connect with the community. And what I heard was that went well, and we got lots of useful feedback.
Yeah, I was gonna talk through this slide a little bit. So our role in the cleanup aspect of this project is to aid frontier and community engagement. So typically we have community meetings. We hold them quarterly. What we had been doing was having them at in the evenings. We had one at the Cox Building in Maysville and one at the City Commission meeting room. But with this last one, we kind of took a page out of Blueprint Kentucky's book, and we decided to bring the meeting to the people. So we have in Maysville every year, it's called Pickers and Grinners. It's just a festival downtown. And we decided to have a booth there. You can see on the table there, we shared pictures of the progress inside. A lot of feedback we've gotten from the community. They're very interested to see what's going on there, which understandably. So we shared pictures of the progress, some of the same pictures that we just showed on the screen there. You can see we also had a physical comment box so people could share any comments, questions they had physically. We also had a QR code so people could scan and take a survey. And then later on, we shared that survey on Facebook, and we've gotten close to 70 responses on that. So a lot of good engagement with the survey. We also had a map up there you can see. We had a large map of the property that showed the boundaries. One of the things we noticed in the community, there was some confusion, I think, about how large the property actually is. It's not just the building, it goes beyond a little bit. So we showed that just to educate people. And then we also had small maps with little stickers. People could write on the stickers and put where they had ideas for where parking should be, where community spaces should be, things like that. So that went really well. We're looking to continue doing our community engagement activities in this manner. So having like discussion oriented settings at community events. There's some farmers markets that go on downtown from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So we've got plenty of opportunities throughout the next several months that we're going to do. And all of these community events that we do, we also host the community involvement plan. And that's required as part of the grant, but it's also something that, as Tom mentioned, we really want to engage the community and inform them, teach them not only about the project, but part of the grant is to teach them about brownfields in general. So we host the community involvement plan on our website. It's also available physically at all the places you can see there. And then we update our websites very regularly. And one thing I wanted to mention too was how strong our partnership is with the city and county and Frontier both. We really get a wide audience when we share this information. So we all post it on our websites. We all post it on our Facebook. And so it goes far and wide. So we've got a lot of good feedback from that.
As Kaylee switches, probably the best comment from the pickers and grinners, just to throw in real quick, was to add an additional floor to the top that was encompassed in glass as a rooftop terrace. I thought that one was funny. That's pretty good.
Tom, this is all you.
Yeah.
I just very quickly, as I said earlier, I think it was important for us, but also helpful to our both our application and our conversations with the city residents that we had a plan. And our plan was always to put housing into the structure. We're going to apply for low-income housing tax credits and historic tax credits. We're currently planning to have a mixed use, or rather mixed income development. So some of the units will be income targeted, some of them will be market rate. We're also even contemplating the possibility of incorporating some ownership units as well as rental. So that we're trying to be as creative as possible, just kind of again to lean into the location of this building creates the opportunity to put housing, really nice housing, about a block from downtown, and the in proximity to other residences. This won't be the only residence in downtown. The Maysville, like a lot of small towns in Kentucky, has a good bit of residential housing in walking distance of the center of downtown, and we want this to contribute, and we want the people who live here to be able to walk to town, take advantage of the opportunities living in town. So Maysville's a nice walkable community. We want Hayswood to contribute to that. So that's our plan.
All right. Thank y'all. That was great. This is our final contact slide. I'm also realizing my information is not on there. If you have Blueprint Kentucky questions, you can email me at tyler.mcdaniel@uky.edu. That's my bad. We're about at time, but if anyone has a question or two, we might be able to squeeze those in. So much good information, such a robust, really big project that I am so happy is happening. And I appreciate all your hard work, but also the ways that you kind of illustrated the complexity of something like this and what it takes to pull something like this off. It's a huge lift, and I think I have a couple of brief questions myself. I have many, but I'll try to do the brief ones. One, outside of that rooftop terrace, which I also would like to second, including that on top. What do you do with that feedback from community engagement sessions, and how does it influence the project itself moving forward?
I'd just like to say, Tyler, when and Tom and I and the mayor were talking about this, what was key, I felt like, was when we sat down and started calling neighbors, it was just a simple fact that we made a phone call. And they were so appreciative of that, just to let them know what was going on and that, that we reached out to them. That, I think, went a long way with this project. I don't, Mayor or Tom, if you want to add to that.
I just agree. I think I have talked to a few of those people we talked to that day, and it continues to resonate with them that the effort we made, which was very easy. It was about 3 hours one morning. Sit down, make some calls, connect one-on-one. I think some of the residents would have been glad to have a conversation in a public forum. I think others really appreciated the one-on-one contact, and I thought that was for me, that's a great lesson.
And I will add to that one of the nice things about working with Frontier is they didn't have a rubber stamp notion of what it was going to be like. They really reached out and listened to what people have to say, and they have done their research on where the need is the greatest. I mean, we have need at all economic levels here, and so they're working now with those architects, and Tom can add to this, but to come up with a design that helps address the greatest need and that would make the most sense and workable. And so I appreciate, again, how that partnership has continued with as we go forward with deciding what's actually going to be in there.
I think it's been a great conversation, and we're glad to continue to listen, because I think that's when you learn the most, when you listen. And as a affordable housing advocate, I believe that you have to think about what's appropriate housing. And sometimes mixed use is the right way to go, and mixed income, not always. But this location just lends itself to mixed income, and I think it's going to be a great project.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that. We are at time, so I want to respect everyone's time unless there's any pressing questions that come in. I want to remind all of our Maysville residents once again, I know these things they take a long time, and it can be frustrating and wondering when things like this are going to finish. But I've really enjoyed seeing the progress pictures and once again being reminded of the scope and the idea again that these things are a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm just excited to see what happens eventually. But thank you all again for speaking. Give a little clap for all of our panelists. Give a clap for all of our attendees. Please follow the City of Maysville, Frontier Housing, Buffalo Trace Area Development District, and Blueprint Kentucky on social media to stay up to date with what we're working on. Yeah. Thank you all for speaking. Thank you all for coming. And hopefully we see each other again soon.
Tyler, thanks for this opportunity also.
Thanks for pulling it together, Tyler. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all.